Thank you, Maya, and thank you so much to Ceeds of Peace to be here today. It's actually really inspiring to be one of the last speakers because then I can build off of, I think, what has been spoken about earlier and to kind of connect things. The title of my presentation is Perspectives for a Diverse Hawaii, Personal Practice and Policy. And I always think it's important to start with your personal story. So again, to make those connections with everybody around you, and so people can really feel your story, connect with it, and then not only feel that, but then be empowered to do something about it. And so in my case, I'll share some stories that I had in my schooling, which compelled me to the practice and the work that I do today. And I actually am a professor in curriculum studies at the University of Hawaii in multicultural education. So this is today is exactly everything that I imagine and teach in the work that I do in teacher education. So the celebrating diversity part is kind of my piece. And so I want to talk about some actual resources that teachers can use in the classrooms that I have found really helpful. And then with my new hat on the Board of Education, the policy piece. So when I am serving on the Board of Education, I think to myself, okay, what kind of policy would I want up here in order to make the work that we do here actually happen and support our work? So I want to share a couple different policies that we've been working on the Board of Ed. So you're familiar as teachers that it actually supports what we do and what we believe in. So thank you, Carrie, if you can move it. So it was hard to pick which ones that the work that I do supports. So all of them pretty much I believe in and I incorporate. The critical thinking piece, for me, it's how do we get teachers to think about these kinds of diversities and how do we integrate it into our teaching? Next slide. The compassion piece, the caring piece, I think is obviously really important. We need to know our students, care about them in order to include it into our classrooms. So I have a little activity that I want you to do. And so, you know, we talk about diversity, and there's multiple different forms of diversity as spoken about today. And I just want you to just kind of consciously think about these different categories right here: ethnicity, race, gender, class, religion, sexuality, and language. And I want you to write down on your paper, categorize kind of like from top to bottom in terms of which categories have influenced your identity in life from the most to the least. And obviously these all interact and affect who we are, but I'm forcing you to think of ones that have been most prominent in your life that have affected your identity. So go ahead and list that. Okay, so how many of you put ethnicity or race as a category that has influenced your life? Raise your hand. Okay, as your first. Okay, for your first. Obviously, again, all of these affect who we are. How many of you put gender? Okay. Class. Okay. Religion. All right. Sexuality. Okay. And language. Okay. Now I'd like you to turn to the person next to you and do a little pair share in terms of share with them your category and why you put that particular category as the one that has influenced your life the most. Just 1 minute. Why? Thank you, because this could be something we could talk about for a long time. But I'm just curious in terms of why people chose certain categories as something that has been prominent in their life in terms of their diversity. Someone who chose gender. Can you please raise your hand who chose gender? Okay. I'm going to diversify who chose gender here? Okay, so why did you choose gender?
Kind of long story. I was probably about 3.
Okay.
I'm Peruvian, South
Okay.
America, male-dominated world, but
Mm-hmm.
particular country. And as a little girl, informally, men and women segregate in gathering occasions. But as a little girl, I was allowed, obviously, to be in the men's side.
Mm.
And I heard them speak about their wives.
Mm.
And at 3, I said, I will never be a traditional wife, ever.
Okay. Okay. So from seeing discrimination, it encouraged you to fight and fight for some of the inequalities that you saw that women had faced. Okay. Thank you. How about religion? Did anyone choose religion? A couple of you chose religion. Okay. Gonna go back here. I feel like Oprah here. Why did you choose religion?
I chose religion because that's the first thing people usually notice about me, and they never believe that I am a retired United States military veteran. That's not what they see, so when I go to the gate, they're always looking at my ID card, extra long, extra hard. And I can actually put language there too, because most people see me and don't believe that I speak English. And they usually speak very loud to me. Do you understand? And I kind of look at my kids and look back, and just pretend that I don't speak no English.
Okay, so again, you've had personal experience with how people have labeled you or had prejudices against you based on your diversity or your difference, okay? And the last one, language. Anyone? Language. Yes, language.
I chose language because in my early life, my dad worked for an airline and we spent a lot of time outside the U.S. I guess a lot of military people have a similar feeling. So I always was aware of others being aware of the fact that I was a speaker of English. We loved the experiences that we had, but I realized that I was being kind of categorized that way, either as an American or an English speaker.
Mm-hmm.
So that comes to the fore for me.
Okay, so for you, it was being part of a language group that was the majority language, and that being aware of it and being aware of how that influenced your identity and how others looked at you identified this category influence. Yes?
I would also say that in many of the places we traveled, which I found very interesting, I felt like I was part of a minority language as well. And that, I think, shaped a lot of things in the positive as my life has gone on.
Wonderful. Thank you. And you want to add something to that?
Well, my order of importance actually, in number 1, has actually 3 things. Ethnicity, race, religion, and gender. It's partly because, that's not entirely my identity now, but that used to be. Partly because I am a Tibetan Buddhist.
Mm-hmm.
So as a Tibetan, when you're born a Tibetan, that means you're a Buddhist.
Mm-hmm.
And being born a man in Tibetan Buddhist culture, that's part of the package, and it comes with certain elements of what it means to be a person. So I have 3.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine to have 3, and in fact, again, these are all aspects that make up our identities. And so what it did do, though, was kind of force, which ones kind of bubbled to the top in terms of had an impact on our life and the experiences in our life. And so I like this activity because with students, because it forces some conversations around some categories in which we need to understand, too, in terms of our identities. And so for me, and I purposely didn't bring up the ethnicity one, I wanted to bring up ethnicity as a category that has affected my life, and one in which it has made, like I said, my professional life in terms of how do we talk about ethnicity, how do we bring in culture into the classroom in terms of specific ethnicity. And so one of the Peace Toolkit activities is to bring in your stories And so I wanted to share one quick poem that I had written about my ethnicity. And it's actually called a balagtasan, which is a Filipino form of jousting in poetry. And so I have my students sometimes do these balagtasans where you're trying to figure out struggles between and inside yourself, perhaps. And so this is my balagtasan. And it starts out with isip, my mind. Tall nose, my mom tells me so, for beauty I'm taught in books is nothing like my looks. Flat nose, pug nose, pinch it on the bridge just so, pray to God, make a wish, and a change will bring happiness. Light skin, fair skin, the world tells me so, for beauty in the media shows white over brown, blonde over brunette, and the European standard of beauty is set. Brown girl, dark girl, wash away the dirt, pray to God, make a wish, turn my skin into a whitened cream, and achieve the complexion of my dream. And so I grew up not wanting to be the color of my skin. I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood in the Midwest, in fact, and so I wasn't proud of who I was and was not proud of being Filipino. But as I counter that with my kaluluwa, or my soul, in my balagtasan, I say, beauty is God's gift to me. Look in the mirror and what do I see? Petite nose, dark hair, skin of Kayumangi. What must be done is to define my own beauty, for God would never create anyone so ugly. And so that's my counter. I do remember growing up, my mom telling me to pinch my nose, to tell me to lift that. Very much of probably a remnants of a colonial version of what beauty was, but it impacted who I was, impacted my self-worth, impacted my sense of self and my confidence. And so because of that, a lot of my work is about building the confidence and the pride in just whoever you are, whatever your diversity is, and everyone listed different things. And so go back to those moments in which why you chose your diversity, and about us as teachers. How do we bring that into the classroom in proud and strong ways? So I'm sharing you a picture of a class that, so I've made it my life work to do multicultural education, and specifically in my area of Filipino education and curriculum and pedagogy. And incidentally, Filipinos are the second largest ethnic group in the public school system. Does anyone know who the first ethnic group in our public school system is? What did you say?
Japanese.
Okay, so many people think Japanese. Haole, okay. Micronesian? Okay, well, in fact, actually, Native Hawaiians are our largest ethnic group overall at 24%, and Filipinos coming around 22%. So these are large ethnic groups, and it's interesting also to know who your students are, and obviously it's different in different parts of Hawaii. But anyways, this is a picture of a group of students where we brought in a curriculum called Pinoy Teach, which is a Filipino curriculum and pedagogy, into their classroom, and it's about 75% Filipino, parochial school. And one day I asked one of the students, I said, Maria, why do you think you've never ever learned about yourself in school? You guys make up the majority of the classroom. And she stopped for a minute and she said, well, it's probably because Filipinos haven't done anything important. And that was like a dagger in my heart, because to hear that when you don't see yourself represented, whether it be your gender, your ethnicity, your sexuality, there is that equation or equatement to not being important, not being valid, not being there. And so I love this quote, curriculum as windows and mirrors, and here's my curriculum hat, because I love developing curriculum. But Emily Stiles talks about the need for curriculum to function both as a window and as a mirror in order to reflect and reveal the most accurately both the multicultural world that we live in and the student herself and himself. And so my specific work is around representation, not only representation, but then realizing the inequities and then doing something about it. And we've heard today all about how we take issues and how do we problem solve, how do we then make the world a better place. And so this is just some of the curriculum that I've worked on Pinoy Teach, ijeepme.com is one that we developed for the Smithsonian on Filipinos. I've done professional development. But these are all within the context of multicultural education, because we can't divorce ourselves from looking at our stories in larger ways and connecting with others. But I think it's also important to learn depth, too, of particular histories. So I'm just here today to quickly tell you about this one curriculum that I'm really excited about, that Hawaii had a chance to be a part of and pilot. And this is our Perspectives for a Diverse America under Teaching Tolerance. Has anyone ever heard of Teaching Tolerance? Okay, so they are part of the Southern Poverty Law Center. And it's a great resource for teachers. When I was a first grade teacher, I always used their magazines. But now they've developed an actual curriculum because they feel like it's important that we need to start asserting ourselves into this whole standards movement and how we connect with what is going on in teachers' classrooms. So I want to show a really short video, 2 minutes, on this particular curriculum, and then give you a little bit more introduction to this particular curriculum.
And just to share, it's so interesting. We did not share our presentation with any of the speakers, and we have a whole video on teaching tolerance. So that's actually local, and there's locally trained folks in teaching tolerance, so I just want to put that plug in, that we'll make sure that that's up on the website also.
Great. Thanks.
I recognize injustice when I see it.
I can describe how I am the same and different from other people.
I know who I am.
Identity, diversity, justice, action. These are at the heart of Perspectives for a Diverse America, an anti-bias curriculum for grades K through 12. It's designed to help teachers deliver culturally responsive instruction and meet the requirements of the Common Core state standards. Because your students deserve rigor and relevance. All students engage in learning because Perspectives provides educators with tools to design and differentiate lessons. Our framework provides a first-ever roadmap for anti-bias education at every grade level. Teachers select from hundreds of diverse voices in the Central Text Anthology, carefully curated to meet the Common Core's staircase of text complexity. It all comes together in the integrated learning plan with grade-level standards-based literacy strategies and assessments. Get started now with the curriculum sure to transform your teaching and your students' learning.
So Hawaii was fortunate enough to be part of a pilot study with the Perspectives, along with 7 other pilot sites. And so now it has been released, and it's actually such a wonderful resource, I think, for teachers. And this actually, just kind of in a nutshell, talks about it's a literacy-based curriculum that marries anti-bias, social justice content with the rigor of the Common Core state standards. And so we know that literacy is such a powerful way to bring out stories, to connect and see difference and to see reflection. So one of their big things is about creating this database of vetted resources that are multicultural, that bring out social justice, as well as meeting, of course, these mandates like Common Core and so forth. And so the biggest piece that I love about actually this particular curriculum is that they have a framework to understand multiculturalism and identity and diversity. And so it's about taking kids through these, what they call these 4 steps. Identity, looking at developing identity within students. With a strong identity, then that's when you can connect with others, and this focus on diversity and connecting with others. The next domain that we want students and teachers to move through is helping kids look at justice, looking at inequities in our society, both at an individual and systemic level. And sometimes this is the hardest level to get teachers to look at and talk to with students, looking at stereotypes and discrimination. Sometimes we feel comfortable in these levels, but then how do we move kids to the justice piece of looking at things a little bit more systemically and then taking action on and speaking up and being like the giraffe and actually taking courage to do something. And so they bring students, the idea is to look at these 4 domains And then also look at them across different grade levels. Identity, diversity, justice looks different in a K through 2 classroom as it would in a 9 through 12. And so they actually look at these standards and outcomes from these different grade levels as well as these from these particular domains. This is a really brief overview of this. And this is what I also love about it is, like I said, they have 300 different texts from an informational, literature, multimedia, and visual standpoint that you can choose from that have been vetted by them. So essentially, if you see here on their website, if you click on Advanced Filter here, to browse the central text, because sometimes maybe you're like, okay, if I want to talk about gender and during a certain time period, then you would go here and you would actually check the grade level, what kind of text type. If you're looking at it through the lens of immigration, LGBT, gender, class, certain themes, and then they actually organize text according to these different domain biases, and then out pops these different texts. And they even when you click on it, then it produces the actual text for you. So it's really a one-stop shop with also showing how you create an integrated learning plan with strategies. And then you basically, at the end, they ask you all these questions as you're developing your unit plan, and then out pops this unit plan or lesson plan. So I show this picture because it's a really kind of, again, a great resource for teachers to be able to integrate these topics of identity, justice, and so forth with text, with standards, and with actual action for your students. And so the last thing I just want to end on is we have some board policies that my colleagues and I on the board, we've been working on that support, I think, a lot of the work for today. We have our newly revised Hawaiian Indigenous Languages and Hawaiian Education Policies. We just passed a seal of biliteracy acknowledging our secondary students who are proficient in English and or Hawaiian as an anchor language and an additional language to encourage kids to maintain their heritage languages as well as to learn new languages. We have a family engagement policy that embraces the diverse cultures, languages, strengths, and needs of our families. And I'm working right now on an ELL or a multilingual policy that really looks at how we can create an education for our ELL students so they look at themselves in positive ways and that their languages are viewed as assets, as well as, of course, learning English for an equitable education. So these are kind of my big things that I'm working on, just so that you know that there's things out there for you to do to further the conversation. We are holding a Talking About Ethnicity and Inequality in Public Education forum, actually sponsored by the College of Ed, yours truly, HSTA, and the Center for Uhiro Academy, to continue because we want teachers talking about ethnicity in public education. So that'll be November 11th, and then we are going to be doing a Perspectives for Diverse Hawaii PD3 workshop for teachers. Rosanna Fukuda, our social studies content specialist, and our language arts specialist, content areas are in support of this, and we're looking at launching this April 30th, and then also June 3rd for a 2-day workshop. So if you want to learn more about it, hopefully I've tantalized you in this interest. But there's really a lot of great things, I think, happening in our school system, and we got to make sure that that those of you here continue it into your classrooms and know that there's supports at the board level and at the College of Ed to continue these kinds of conversations. And I'm just thankful to be here, and thank you so much.